How's it going, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And welcome to this wonderful live stream where I'm going to be talking to two gentlemen right here. This is Chris Northrop, which we talked when we did the I think, oh my gosh, was that in June?
Black Box, yeah, that was.
It was in June. Yeah,
Mhm.
Time just like that. It feels like just yesterday. And Mike, also from Magentic Press. And today we are talking about a very special project, one that I'm really excited about as soon as I heard about it, and that is the TEZUCOMI. It's a celebration of the works of Osamu Tezuka, and I've seen the Kickstarter, and I've left the Kickstarter link in the description of the video.
Cool.
So I know there's different tiers, but first of all, I gotta ask, who's the Tezuka fan at Magentic Press? Who's the one that was like, we gotta do this?
Oh, well, I mean, I've been, that's my generation, Astro Boy and all of those things. I mean, there's a lot of titles that I wasn't aware of until I grew older. But, when I saw this in France, so Magnetic brings a lot of titles over from France and Europe. And when I first saw this, I was like, first of all, it's cool because it's all these Tezuka properties. But for us specifically, it was cool because it's all of these Tezuka properties through the lens of all of these great European comic book creators, a lot of which I think, like 5 or 6 of them we've published other books by them.
Yeah, like quite a bit.
Yeah, so it was like part of this was like, oh my God, we've got family members in this book. So it was like multiple reasons for us to bring these stories over.
So this is the kind of stuff that I enjoy because there's so many books that he did over the years, whether it's Astro Boy or Kimba or Unico or Black Sad or not Black Sad. Oh, you guys did get the Black Sad.
Juan Diaz Canales has a story.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they really got some top European creators into this book. And, full transparency, Magnetic didn't put this team together. I mean, this is all Tezuka Productions brought them together. They got together with this guy, Frederic Tout-le-Monde, who he brought in a lot of the talent from Europe for this project. So Tezuka Productions, they wanted to create this anthology back in, 2018? It was all part of Tezuka's 90th birthday celebration. So they were the ones who created these stories. But then I never saw them in Japan, but I first saw them in France, the French edition of these. And I'm like, well, that's cool. So I started talking to the French publisher and they're like, well, this isn't ours. You need to talk to Tezuka. Okay, sure.
Yeah, it's interesting that they got Ken Nomura, who did I Kill Giants, but then I guess that's how Joe Kelly got involved because both of them worked together on that book. Yeah. So they're doing a big a story in here. It's a really cool concept because, oh my gosh, and it's crazy to think about how much Tezuka created in the short amount of time that he was with us.
Yeah, what is it? 150,000 pages of manga, 60 different animated features and series. I mean, he really, he's been referred to as the Disney of Japan, and that's not inaccurate. I mean, he really did revolutionize not only manga production and manga storytelling style, but I mean, he did really kind of bring anime to the table,
Yeah, I remember going to the museum in Japan and just looking at all the books that he did, and it's unbelievable. Like when you see it all together, and you think that one person did all this, it's just insane. And like I said, he passed away at a young age. He didn't get to live to be like 90 something. Like
but I mean, he definitely got a lot of work out there. And like to your point, nowadays, you'll have a penciler and an inker, and then you'll have somebody else coloring, and you'll clean up. I mean, you'll have like a whole team on a book, and I mean, there's a lot of long running stories by a lot of really prolific comic artists, but I mean, one guy, this is like Jack Kirby level of output. I mean, it's just insane.
And even mangaka, this day, like, you know, the bigger stories, the bigger titles, they also have background artists and
Right.
embellishers or people that help out with some of the layouts and things like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
to think about like doing that by yourself in so many volumes of just different series, and he had such a range. That's what I love about his books. Like, you know, you had Astro Boy was, I think, my introduction. We got the, I'm originally from Peru, and we ended up getting the black and white one, and then when it changed over to color, my mind was blown away.
Right.
It was the '80s version of the cartoon.
Yeah.
And then Unico, both of the movies that came over to Peru. Oh my gosh! And at the time, you know, I was a kid, I had no idea it was the same guy that had done both of the series.
Right.
So yeah, I am very excited to talk. I could talk about Tezuka all day. So you guys reached out to. So this you saw it in France, but they were like, "Oh, you need to get a hold of."
Yeah, so I hadn't seen this material before. I thought that it was a French production, you know, using, you know, the French and Spanish artists and stuff. But yeah, when I asked them, they're like, no, this is originally Japanese stuff. They introduced me to Frederick, and we kind of went from there. But in fact, a lot of our layout reference and translation reference is actually translating the French edition. Just because for us it's easier to translate from French to English. So there were a couple cases like with Joe Kelly, you know, we actually got his original English script, and, you know, he was nice enough to, you know, this is where it came from. So we didn't have to translate his because it was already nice. In English. But yeah. So all the creators have been really, really supportive and fantastic. Like, you know, a handful of pieces that we got colored for our book cover. You know, they were originally in black and white, but, you know, we colorized them. We ran them by the artists, and they're all great. They're either really excited or they're like, "Oh, that looks great," but you know, I saw the outfit as being red and white instead of blue, or, you know, something simple like that. But
gotcha. Okay,
exciting.
So, how involved are both of you in this particular project then?
I build the books here first. So I mean, this is, how many pages is this, Mike?
It's 300 pages each. Yeah, so it's total 600 pages. 600
pages of building
mangas.
And then we had to take it and we had to flip it, right? We had to do it in a different format because it's
yeah, I mean, the weird thing is the content that we got. I mean, we got the content, you know, it was all created manga style, so it was all created for right to left.
Right to left. Okay.
Yep.
Thing is, you know, we're using American InDesign, which doesn't allow that layout. I mean, we could, you know, if we wanted to get, I guess, like, you know, there's an East Asian, like, Indian edition where you can lay things out.
I'm sure.
But, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, it's just, you know, it's just a book. You know, it's just pages and spreads. So it was up to us to make sure that we're putting the content in the right order from back to front. So when we're like from the PDF, we're reading the PDF backwards.
Yeah, and reading the scripts. The scripts actually were also written backwards. So the first couple of, like, maybe 15 pages that I did were just wrong, like on my end, before I ever even handed them to Mike.
Yeah, it was a little bit.
15 out of 600 isn't too bad, right? It could have been worse.
Good to notice early.
Took a minute. Took a minute to just get the pattern down, you know, because there were a couple pages where it's like, you know, going from top right to bottom left panel, you know, getting the panel order, that was easy enough. But then even within that panel, there were a couple times where, you know, even the balloons, you're supposed to be reading from right to left, and some of those are in. But it was
a little bit of scrambled eggs in the beginning in my brain, but once I adapted to it, it was a lot easier. So
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
It makes everything else easier now, Mike.
Yeah.
So the books themselves will be printed in the traditional right to left format then?
Yeah, both. So we're publishing this in two different. We're publishing it in manga sized format. It's a little. It's what is it, 525 by 775? But I mean, it's pretty much manga sized. And then we're also doing the gallery sized hardcovers, which is 775 by 11.
I saw those, and oh my gosh. Magentic Press has done a lot of work bringing a lot of European titles over here, and Mike, I know you're familiar with the treatment that in Europe they give a lot of the manga, especially Tezuka's manga. That's the first time I ever saw Phoenix in oversized hardcover.
Yeah.
They had a oversized hardcover of Blackjack and Buddha, had this big box set. And I was always jealous of that. I was like, oh my gosh, we got to get that in America somehow. So this makes me really excited that, you're doing a different format of, you're sticking to the tankobon size,
right.
But also doing a bigger version too.
Yeah, it kind of made sense. I mean, particularly for our fan base at Magnetic, it's like, of course we want to have it available in the authentic tankobon style for manga fans who may not know Magnetic. And that's the edition that you'll find at retail when that comes out, I think in March. But then, so many of our fans already know us for, really solid hardcover books, plus so many of the creators, from Europe, we've already published their books in hardcover at that larger size. We did those for Magnetic fans, more so than like manga fans.
I love it. Yeah. So I'm glad that you're doing that.
And I'll say that there's certain ones like certain ones it doesn't make that much of a jump of impression, but the Buddha, the Big X, Team Phoenix, that artwork, when you see it in the larger format, it really thrives. Like it really fills the page and it thrives. Like it's really impressive. So,
well, I've seen some of the internal artwork that you all have shared with me, and I can definitely see how some of the art styles benefit from a bigger size. I mean, you can definitely tell a lot of the details in the backgrounds and the little minor things that you may not notice on a smaller size book. The reason I was asking you about the right to left format is, how did you see it in France? Like, was it printed in left to right, or was it printed in right to left?
No, it was right to left. Actually, so I mean, we're sticking with that. Our original plan when we started talking with Tezuka Productions about this was we were going to print the manga in the original right to left. And then we thought, well, for the Western audience who don't, they don't know manga, but they want this material, we were going to print it left to right. And, it's like, well, okay, so we'll flip the pages and mirror those.
Mirror style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, we could have gotten it so that the panels flowed left to right, but then there was so much, there was so much within inside the pictures. Yeah. I mean, there would have been a lot of internal panel touch up necessary. So we were just like, you know what? I think we're going to teach hardcover readers to read right to left.
It's easier to hold if you're a lefty.
Sure.
It was. I mean, that's the way we used to get them, right, back in the 80s and the 90s here in America, until the big Tokyo pop manga revolution of the early late 90s. But I was gonna say that seems like more work, and I always thought that too. Like, that was more work putting into these books when they were doing it in that format to custom make them for the American audience, or I guess audience that isn't used to reading from right to left.
Yeah.
And to cut and then to mirror images and especially the double page spreads and characters are, one time, like in one panel they're right-handed, and the double page spread they're back to being left-handed.
Yeah, I was talking with, actually I just saw him in San Diego talking to Steve Olaf, who did
Akira.
And I mean, just the amount of, because that was it Epic, or it was Epic.
It was the Epic line at the time.
Yeah, I mean, they flipped everything around and moved some stuff around, and just the amount of work there. Like, if a panel couldn't be just flipped because there's text or some kind of context inside of that, like a character's suddenly his eye patch moves to the other side of his face. It's like, in those cases, then they had to figure out how to reverse order the panels. And it's just, I mean, it could have been done. It just would have been a lot more work. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's like, I'd just rather keep it authentic, keep it true to the artist's original layout.
I think, honestly, I mean, times have changed. There's a whole generation of kids that have only known manga in right to left format.
Yeah. I've been in Barnes and Noble. It's just
okay. But I mean, and then there's the rare case of something like Blade of the Immortal, which is still being put in America in left to right format. I think that's one of the few.
I remember as a kid hanging out in Barnes and Noble for hours and hours, and Borders at the time for hours and hours and hours. And I slowly saw every year the manga section get bigger. And it went from being like, what is that, to like, wow, I should check that out.
Oh yeah.
Like it grew so fast, and I have no doubt that people are not going to have an issue going right to left, right?
Well, we do
a whole generation that can do it.
I mean, I know a lot of the manga companies, they will put on that first/last page, hey, you're in the back of the book, and they'll, with a little diagram like,
we have
it. So we did one of those. We made one of those.
I think that's smart, right? Especially when you see the magnetic logo, right? They're like, oh, it's a magnetic logo. This is a tribute book.
That was
the last page.
Yeah, even though all of our content was already laid out in the right order, I realized after I laid out the covers, I'm like, oh wait, I got the covers on backwards. I got the front cover on the back of the book, so I had to flip everything.
Don't worry.
Then it was like, then I got to flip the magnetic logo. I don't know. It was just, yeah.
Don't worry. This book is fine, everybody.
Oh, it looks great. Yeah. Yeah. Even and the slip cases, it's so funny working with our printer. Our printer's like, well, the slip case, should it open on the left or the right? I'm like, what? Correct. What difference does that make? What is the left? What is the right?
Correct.
It's the spine side. The books go in, spine out.
But I guess that is a question I don't think about, right? If you have a slipcase, how does it fit in there? Where do you put volume 1? Okay, that legit question though, because there are box sets now of manga, and I have some viewers that actually put their manga in right to left order. So like volumes 1 star. Yeah, and I'm like, okay, that's too much. I don't think I could do that.
Well, like in this case, there are only 2 volumes, so dealer's choice. It'll probably come 1, 2, left, right, but if you want to reverse them, the box will fit them both either way.
I've seen people do that.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, tell me some of the wonderful talent that is working on this, because we mentioned a little bit, a little bit of names earlier, but I'm excited about some of these folks, and we just named just like 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most recognized ones here in the States will certainly be Joe Kelly and Ken Nomura. I Kill Giants.
What are they working on? What characters?
So they did a Blackjack story. Yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's like high speed, fast paced. Like Joe doesn't like the characters barely have a minute to breathe. It's really great. It's definitely the 2 of them really work together. Ken's style. I mean, at first blush, you're like, oh, that's so loose and sketchy, but the thing is that's the dynamics. Yeah, I mean,
but it feels like this kinetic energy just moving through the pages, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's very fast, and it's like it has to be that loose. It has to have that kind of elasticity to move at the pace that it moves. So it was different, but that's probably what I didn't know Blackjack as a character. I didn't know a lot of these characters, right? So there's a lot that are more obscure than what I would have been exposed to.
Oh, there are characters that have not been. There are properties that haven't been published in English yet.
Yeah,
we are talking to them about.
I noticed that.
I really like them all. It's just like this huge variety
Yeah.
that I didn't expect, because I was just like, oh, he does more futuristic stuff, right? So I was thinking like Astro Boy, the Metropolis stuff, like all that Big X. I was thinking like these sci-fi things, but some of my favorite ones were like Blackjack. Like Blackjack is a very, very cool character, and he's used a few times in this. He featured a couple of times. I think it's really cool for those of you who don't know watching this. Blackjack is a medical practitioner who is outside the system.
Yeah.
Okay? So he'll do heart surgery on a mobster that can't go to a hospital, right?
Yeah.
So like
it's like a medical it's like a medical procedural.
Yes.
With an anime slant. So
yeah.
And then he's got what was it Pokemon?
Piniko?
Yeah,
the little girl that's trapped in that body. Yeah,
kind of half robot, half prosthetic enhancements and all that. So, and the 2 of them have this great banter, especially in Joe Kelly's story. I mean, the 2 of them bounce off of each other. It's like a buddy cop.
That relationship is one of my favorites on display in the book. Like,
Yeah.
I love it.
He's a tormented soul. He can fix everybody, but he can't fix the scar on his face.
Yeah,
that's true.
But he wears it as a badge of honor for his friend who donated that half a face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh man, I have that entire.
Great stuff, everybody. This is great stuff. This is
Juan Diaz Canales from Black Sad. That's who it was.
Yeah.
What is he working on?
So he did a story based on Tezuka's message to Adolf.
Yeah.
Which, for those who aren't familiar with that, there was Tezuka's work really took a maturing arc, as he grew older, kind of moved away from some of the kid stuff like Astro Boy and whatnot, and his stories started to take on more significant political, historical, dramatic tales. And Message to Adolf was about 3 guys who happened to be named Adolf, including Hitler, during World War II. And the whole plot was about whether or not they've uncovered documentation that Hitler may actually have Jewish heritage. And so that was like the whole plot of that original series. And so Juan did a story called 3 Richards, about 3 characters named Richard, also in that same time period, who kind of experience kind of a microcosm of that same existential threat. But the interesting thing here is Juan, he illustrated it as well. He didn't just write it, he wrote and illustrated. I don't know how many people, certainly in the States with Black Sod, if they realize that he's also a really gifted illustrator. Man,
the potential of stories like these are endless. I mean, and we've seen, other creators, other mangaka creators kind of use the characters or do follow-ups. Like there's a current one right now of Adam of Astro Boy. There's the Urasawa's Pluto.
Yeah.
Which is, if you're a fan of Astro Boy, that is a really amazing story. So there's a lot of characters in a different range, because he did horror stories too. He did like samurai stories.
Yeah.
And I noticed that some of them are in this collection, so I can't wait to see what the creator.
There's a horror samurai story in this collection.
Yeah.
But the Dororo,
there's a story based on Ayako, which is like a real psychological horror tale. Actually, it's the first story in volume 1.
Yeah.
By Surya, who did this book called Tally that Oni put out, I think, last year. But yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing about this. And I won't deny it's also maybe a little bit of a challenge in how to market this, is there are some dark stories in this. We've got Unico and Astro, and they're fun, and even though they're kind of full of light and happiness, even those stories kind of take a little dramatic twist.
I'd say the Unico one is pretty dark. I was caught off guard.
It is.
Because I was like, I didn't know too much about Unico. I knew very surface level. So I was kind of surprised at like how much of a drama it became and how serious the stakes were.
Yeah.
So yeah, his work, it can get very mature very fast. Like,
he covered the gamut.
Even if it looks like a kid's thing, like it's not afraid to like talk about death or a relationship ending or civil rights. Like it very fast goes into like something that has a lot of substance.
Yeah. There's a story based on, he did a book called MW, which was this real psychological drama between a priest and a serial killer and their shared history of,
that was a lot.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, so there's a story in here by Victor Santos based on MW, and it's a taut psychological kidnapping tale that be prepared for how it ends, because it's not going to go where you think it's going to go.
Like there's a Barbara story in here.
Yeah.
So it goes from things that people know, right? Like I think most people probably know Astro Boy now. Most people, I would like to think. But there's things in there like Princess Knight and Barbara and MW, like you mentioned. And I think those are some really cool works that don't get a lot of spotlight because, unfortunately, the books are out of print in America.
Yeah. Or they just haven't been picked up. Like, honestly, one of my favorite stories in this collection is based on a series called Midnight that he did, and it's about a taxi driver who he's got a traumatic history because he got into an accident and one of his passengers was put into a coma. So he just has this overwhelming guilt, and, you know, because he loves her as well. And so it's like, you know, it's kind of gritty. I think, well, I don't want to speculate. I should know by now, but I don't know when exactly it came out, but it has a very Taxi Driver kind of feel to it. Just that Scorsese kind of New York. Yeah. So, and that, I don't think that's ever been translated in English. I haven't even been able to find fan subs. So I am talking to them about, you know, hey, let's bring that over for the first time. But
well, that's the other question. As a fanboy of Tezuka, and a lot of the stuff that I talk about, like on my videos for years, have been out of print. And I don't, you know, the stories with publishers, of course, manga publishers here in America is always kind of the same. You don't know how long they're holding onto a license. You don't know what kind of work, like what kind of deal they worked with the estate. They can print it, or they can publish it in digital, but they cannot physically publish it. Or sometimes they don't even know what they have. And because a lot of these manga publishers in America, unfortunately, bought up so much that they probably have no idea what they're sitting on. Yeah. And I feel like there definitely was a resurgence of Tezuka, like at least in America here, with Vertical Comics for a while. Like Dark Horse brought over Astro Boy, and then Vertical started doing a lot of his other stuff, like Buddha and Black. They're the ones that did Blackjack, like all the way through.
Yeah,
and they did limited edition hardcovers of that stuff. So I'm hoping to see that again, and that's where the next question is. With you all talking to, you know, the Tezuka properties. Is that something that could be open, or are you guys open to doing things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly this isn't our first manga or anime adjacent product so far. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the Lupin the Third anniversary book that we did last year, but I mean, between that and now this, and we've got a RPG in the works based on a pretty recognizable title that we haven't announced yet. I think we've got a number of really interesting things that will appeal to the manga and anime market. Awesome. So we are moving in that direction. There are a couple of other manga titles that I'm trying to find, previously published that I know they're out of print, so I'm trying to track down whether or not, those licenses can be picked up again. But we're definitely looking to grow this portion, and not just to take a piece of the big manga pie, because everybody knows that manga is huge right now. We're not just trying to cash in; like, we're going for projects that we're specifically interested in. We're not just grabbing any title that's available.
But you obviously are coming from a fan angle too. When you were talking about Midnight, you're talking about stories that you would love for people to. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much out there that it's just sitting in that hasn't been printed since like the early aughts, late 90s. Some of the stuff. I mean, gosh, the Eclipse stuff, right? Area 88. I don't think Area 88 has ever come out outside of Eclipse comics.
This is the thing. There's like, when I'm thinking about titles that I'm looking up, it's from when I was reading manga in like the 80s and 90s. So it's interesting you bring up Area 88.
Dagger Kamui.
Golgo 13. I mean, there's a lot of great material that, I mean, it's the generational cycle has come around. There's a whole cycle of fans now who may never have even heard of that stuff. I mean, 2001 Nights. I mean,
that's that's such a classic. I did a manga tour of my library, and it's always funny because people are like, have been wanting to see it, and I'm like, okay, I'm 45 years old. I'm showing you like stuff that most of you weren't even born when this stuff was coming out. But sure, I'll show it. But it's really cool because a lot of the audience is like, oh my god, that looks so cool, or that sounds so awesome. Why can't they reprint that?
Yeah, what's old is new again, honestly. I mean, some of these things, I mean, sure, you've got Akira and Nausicaa, but I mean, those are going to stay in print forever. But there's side lesser works that, like, even it's also a Tomo, but what was it?
The Dream, not Dream. The Old Man. There's Rojin Z, and then the.
What was the apartment? The apartment.
Dark Horse. The old guy, Domu.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, but the thing is, I mean, that stuff still hold. I mean, you look at it, and then it's still as excellent as it was.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that I would love to see. Right. What'd you say?
Appleseed, you remember that one?
Appleseed, of course I remember. That's Masamu Shiro, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Long before Ghost in the Shell, there was that Black Magic M66. And,
M66, yeah.
Dude, see, I'm a fan of that old school stuff, and a lot of it, unfortunately, like I said, hasn't been in print. You put a hardcover on it, dude, people will buy it up. Dark Horse discovered that when they did Berserk. They put a nice package on it, and they put a $50 price tag, and it sold. I mean, good enough to get a Trigun, Helsing, and what's Blade of the Immortal. So
yeah, see, I mean, that's the weird thing about manga coming into Magnetic is, I mean, the whole thing about manga is it was just super disposable, cheap to produce, cheap paper. I mean, it was really just meant to be a disposable outlet for stories on a very rapid basis, and a lot of those stories are really good. We just want to put it on something a little less disposable so that, you know, you're proud to like keep it around and show it to your friends, you know, 10, 15, 20 years later. And that's how it survives the generational cycle. Is just making sure that the format itself that you present it in lasts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know if Chris, you're on mute. I didn't know if you were talking or not.
Oh.
I saw you moving your hands, and I talk with my hands too.
Am I good now?
Yes.
Or no.
Okay. Well, I was just saying that it's kind of like there needs to be almost like a preservation effort, right? Like there needs to be a way to keep these things in good condition, in a condition that can be rebought and traded and stuff, and not be damaged and worn out. Because a lot of these, there's a lot of bookstores in Portland, and I find a lot of secondhand books. When I find the Magnetic books secondhand, they're like almost, I mean, you'll argue this because you're near mint condition, but they are almost in near mint condition. People really, it's hard to, a hardcover book, its lifespan is so much longer than a paperback manga or any kind of paperback.
Yeah.
You know, it just lasts longer, you know.
Well, and even just putting it into, you know, not just putting it into a hardcover, but like we've been doing more of the slipcases lately, and just make sure also covers something nice with, you know, not just spot UV, not just our signature curved corners, but you know, it uses good paper, and you know, maybe there's a foil treatment, or it's like, to your point, Chris, I went, you know, sometimes I'll stop by half price books up in the burbs, and just to scout, to see if if any of our books are there. You know, it's kind of that double edge. It's like, oh, it's cool to see your book on a shelf, but I don't think you want to see it in a half price book, because that means somebody's sold it. But I rarely do. Here's the thing.
Someone wants to share it.
Yeah.
I mean, someone wants to share it. That's
right.
I
will say I've been to a lot. I've done a lot of videos on my channel pre-COVID, going into different secondhand stores. I never ran across a Magnetic Press book.
Yeah.
And you guys stand out. Like you said, the curved corners, like that always gives, that's always Magnetic Press to me.
I mean, even our paperbacks. I mean, you know, we're going to be, we're working up a plan, because we've got a bunch of books that have gone out of print just in the last 10 months. So we're working on plans for, instead of just reprinting the hardcovers, which retailers have trouble with our books, not because they're not beautiful, but, you know, if a retailer would rather buy, you know, 2 lower priced paperbacks instead of 1 high priced hardcover. So we're going to be doing more of those, but I don't know if you've seen any of our trade paperbacks, but even then we use thicker cover stock. We do curved corners on the block, everything. So, I mean, even our paperback books stand out.
I think Chris has one. Let me.
Yeah, there you go.
Highlight him.
So
you guys released Saya in paperback?
Yeah, it was because that was one of the first.
I love that book.
Yeah, we ran out of print on that, ran out of the slipcases, but people still want it.
So that one right there definitely gave me anime vibes when I picked it up. That was before I knew Magnetic Press.
It has a international manga award there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why.
That's
well, and here's a segue back to one of your first questions. So JD Morvan, who wrote that, he's got a story. He actually wrote the Midnight Story in the Tezuka book.
That's true.
The manga that wasn't translated here. Yeah. And oh my gosh, like anybody can tell you, the when this stuff goes out of print, it's insane. Like manga like that, especially like Phoenix is this books that I'm missing.
Yeah,
that's been out of print for years because I thought, I would always find like a random volume. And I'm like, I'll wait until I get like the first one.
Yeah,
and I never found them. And then it's crazy, but time goes like that. 10 years later, I'm like, oh, that's right. I'm still missing Phoenix. Let me look up for. Oh my god.
That's the weird thing nowadays. I don't know, with the internet, with Amazon, with just so many titles out there, there's so much content. I think a lot of people have just gotten, myself included, gotten into the mindset of it's like, I'm sure I'll find, a full set of it, in 6 months or whatnot. Mm-hmm. But now there's just so much content out there that publishers will just let something lapse, and then you won't see it again. You'll have to find it on eBay for $300 or.
Then you have things on a subscription model, like to read, or they have it with games, they have it with music, and like at any point someone could just take it off a store or take it off a library, and you just don't have it anymore. So there's plenty of things that have been sitting like on my list at different places that I'm like, I'm gonna get to it. I have a subscription to this thing, and then it like disappears.
Yeah. I've had books on my Amazon wish list that I just keep waiting on. Mm-hmm. And next thing I know, it's like, oh, this is no longer available. It's available from these 3
for $80.
And it's exactly. It's like, $245, and it was a $30 book at one point.
Right.
And the thing is, that's why we want to do these. Like when we put out these slipcase editions, and even now, our hardcovers, I mean, they really are going to be limited. So I mean, I think some of our limited or our repeat fans realize that we're not going to make those slipcases again. So if you want a slipcase, get it in this campaign.
So let's talk about that, because you mentioned so this is a Kickstarter. Again, the link is in the description of the video. But there's going to be books available for retailers.
Yeah, the paperback. So the trade the manga editions, the individual mangas will be available in stores, but not there is a boxed set. We got a slipcase of both manga. That's exclusive to the campaign. I think we'll probably only make 500 of those. Same thing with the hardcover, probably only about 500 of those. Then we do have that super fan level where 250 of each of those are going into the super fan tier. But I mean, we're only making them for this campaign. And, then once that print runs out, you'll only be able to get the paperback. It's like our Monkey King set. We had the paperback omnibus, which was also kind of manga sized, 300 pages. Then we had the 260 page hardcovers. Then we had the slipcase that was limited. I think we ended up doing 1,000 of those, but those are almost completely gone. The hardcovers, even the hardcovers, are almost sold out, and we're not going to reprint the hardcovers. And even the trade paperbacks, I just put in a reprint order. So the only thing for Monkey King, the only thing we're going to be reprinting are the paperbacks.
So if you want the hardcovers of the Monkey King, go to the Magentic Press web store.
And fast, because seriously.
Fast.
So you guys have, I guess you guys have adapted that. That's literally the book mentality, right? Like whenever I said book mentalities, whenever publishers release a hardback, eventually a paperback will come out a year later, 6 months later, and that's what gets reprinted. The hardback becomes rare and rare as the years go on, until there's some anniversary or demand is high enough that they see, okay, well, let's reprint a hardcover limited edition or a special hardcover.
And I know even in France there's a couple of like, for example, like Shangri-La and Carbon and Silicon, we did those hardcovers.
Those are beautiful. That's a beautiful box set.
And those are I think we have literally like 4 copies left. In fact, they may, because we're doing this sale right now, they may be going right now. But like in France, rather than reprinting the hardcovers immediately, they did like an illustrated artist edition, which is basically just a black and white version, kind of like what like what our IDW does their, I forget what they call them, but
I think they're called artist editions.
Yeah.
The big artist editions.
Yeah.
They're like the raw. You can see like the whiteout. You can see the and all this.
So they did something like that in France. I mean, and I was thinking about bringing that over as well, but I don't know how much of a demand there is. I'm sure there'd be, a couple hundred people who would like that, but I don't know if that's enough to justify a print run. But I guess my point being, keeping things limited and exclusive not only helps you sell them through in the first place, but kind of really helps fuel the long leg trade sales of the paperback.
How do you? That's gotta. This is a really. It's a question that I've wondered. Like when you're talking about print runs, it's easier now, right? Because you have a Kickstarter with something like this. You can determine the print run of this. But when you guys were coming out at first, like how did you determine how many hardcovers of a particular title? I mean, you can't base it on anything. You were fresh and it was based on European sales.
How did you figure out Super Ego is what he's asking?
Yeah, seriously, Super Ego, our first book, and even like honestly, our second and third book was Naja and Zaya, and both of those, not only did we do the book itself, but then we had the slipcase versions. That was just gut.
I ended up with that one.
Yeah. So those lasted a while. Zaya eventually sold out, but we did print. We printed a lot of those up front.
I got Zaya with I really wanted that carbon and silicon slipcase, so even though I work here, I backed it because it's got to come from, it's got to be shipped from there and everything. So I bought it and I wrote it off on my taxes, but I got Zaya, which I was pretty happy about because I wanted to read it.
If you got a Zaya slipcase, like anybody out there,
not a Zaya slipcase, soft cover.
Yeah, the slipcases went out pretty quick, and then eventually the hard covers are out. But yeah, that's why we went to the trade for that. We still have some Zayas, or I'm sorry, some Najas, but even that, yeah, like I said, we did it was a pretty aggressive, perhaps naive initial print run, but they're finally, they're finally almost out.
Okay. I've always been curious how somebody new to publishing was like, let's print this many, because like I said, now you got to the point where a lot of these books or slipcases or limited edition books that you're coming out with are kickstarted and crowdfunded, so you can kind of get, but you're still having to do retailer copies too.
Sure. Well, so the weird thing is, so even 10 years ago when we did our first books, next year's our 10th anniversary, so like Naja and Zaya, like we were brand new as a publisher, but I had been working with Archaea for 4 years before that. So I had a little bit of market insight, using Archaea numbers to judge. But then again, Archaea also had an established brand, and we were starting from scratch. So, that brand identity, you got to take that brand identity into account.
And man, that's. Yeah, I like asking questions like that because I'm curious how publishers 10 years that took me by surprise.
Yeah, no, next year's going to be awesome. Not only are we going to, is it our 10th anniversary, but just, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but we've got some big titles coming up next year.
Yeah.
Huh.
Maybe in the 10th anniversary you can reprint some of those slipcases that are out of print, Mike, for people that are
maybe. Well, or we'll do a different slipcase just because here's the weird thing about those collectabilities as well is, when you say something is going to be limited, people they jump on board because it's limited, and if you suddenly say, hey, here's 500 more, a lot of people will feel like, wait, you told me it was only going to be 500 and now there's 1,000. And
right. I'm going to give you two perfect examples of that.
Yeah.
So I've been at this, I've been collecting comics for 30, oh my gosh, almost 40 years. And collected editions since 2003.
Yeah.
This is from Fantagraphics, the original Osamu Tezuka box set.
Yeah.
They swore this would never be reprinted.
Uh-huh.
Okay. This is the Osamu Tezuka Saga Limited Edition Volume 1 from Dark Horse Comics, and this is limited to 900 copies.
Sure.
They said this would never be reprinted.
Right.
This was reprinted in 2021. Yeah. It was red, so a little different. The spines were red, so it was a little bit different. It was a hardcover and then a soft cover and the slipcase. This they reprinted for a different reason, though, because Volume 1 was limited to 900 copies. Volumes 2 through 9 and the Legends are limited to 1,500. Meaning that 600 people out there
never got number 1.
So they printed 500 more of these, and I think that one's a little harder to find than this one.
So I guess that's the thing is, I mean, you're not saying that this content may never be reprinted, but this edition, this configuration, design, I honestly, if all they changed was like a spine color, but everything else is exactly the same, that seems a little, I don't know. But
I understand. I'm with collectors too. I get it. I remember. So I'm the guy that gets to announce the breaking news from Marvel Comics and the Omnis that are being reprinted, right?
Yeah.
And there were a couple of people that were upset. That were like, "Well, this is gonna." As ridiculous as it sounds, because these are reprints of comics.
Yeah.
They were upset that some of these titles were being reprinted. They're going to drop the value of my omnibus.
Yeah.
But I mean, but your omnibus isn't even the original, like the single issues are the original printing.
Right.
So collectors are very, very sensitive when it comes to, not all of them, right? Just some of them are sensitive when it comes to reprints. So you're right. Maybe a different slipcase would be a pretty cool way to celebrate 10 years.
Yeah. Or because in talking with Matthew Bablé about like Shangri-La and Carbon and Silicon, and even Adrastia is almost sold out. We're like, well, maybe we can throw in some new, sketchbook material or stuff that hasn't been seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, if re-releasing it in a new configuration, granted, we want to make sure we're not pulling a George Lucas on everybody and forcing them to buy a new edition just because, we want to make sure that there's something that makes it worthwhile.
I don't think most people. When you say George Lucas, I'm just thinking adding a dance number in Return of the Jedi. I don't think you're doing quite that. So I am very excited for this. A total of 600 pages available in trade paperback and available in hardcover format. And there are different tiers where people can go and crowdfund this. When will it be coming out? Since this is already to ease the mind of somebody that doesn't like crowdfunding or is worried that this may never come out. When because this is already out, like you mentioned, right? It's been out in Japan and in France, and I'm assuming other places.
The material is finished. Yeah,
okay.
So the material is all done. I mean, this is just new material. I mean, we've Chris has laid it out. We've edited and all that stuff. So I mean, the files are at the printer. What we're waiting on now is the campaign ends a week from Friday on the 18th, and at that point, that's when we'll set our final print run. And I mean, since the proofs, everything has been approved to print, it's really just a matter of getting to the end of the campaign, finding out how many we need, and then the printer will get the presses rolling. Our goal is to be able to fulfill these in, if not late October, then certainly in November, because November is also, it would have been Tezuka's 95th birthday. So
yeah. So then when will the books be starting? You said retailers would be next March. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think So the manga will be distributed to stores in March.
Okay, excellent. Chris, is there any way we can see some artwork, something, some designs, anything?
I can. Yeah, you can switch that on, and we'll take a look.
Gotcha. Here you go. Here, let's do the full.
So everybody.
Hey, hold on a second. I want to point out right now, how old is this file that you're looking at? Because it's not TEZUCOMICS with an X. It's TEZUCOMI with an I.
Which one should I open, Mike?
I don't know. You should open one of the final InDesign files. Do you have the one that says 775 by 11?
775 by 11. This one says 775 by 11 on it.
No, this is 7.5.
Okay. 7.5 by 11.
Yeah, that was one of the earlier drafts.
Oh,
that's okay.
The draft.
This is how we do it live. You never know when.
We go through multiple drafts.
Oh no, I think that's good though. I mean, you got to catch everything. So
you got to catch everything. So I'm going to open up the cover.
Sure. Just let me know when you're ready to share it, and I'll be happy to put it up there again.
I'll show that to Mr. Mike. Hold on a second.
Sure.
But yeah, basically these files come in.
This one's okay to share then?
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay. Sure.
This, in most cases, when we get our files for a graphic novel, in a lot of cases, in the best cases, we'll actually get the original InDesign file, and with the pages already laid out, and then all we have to do really is just adjust the trim size and re-letter. Some cases, the lettering will be flattened into the artwork, so then we got to go in or Chris has to go in and erase all the word bubbles. In a case like this, this is even more work because we got each individual story separately. So I had to figure out, because I had to make sure that all of this material split, the 600 pages split into 2 even volumes. I didn't want, okay, well, this one's 280 pages and this one's 320. It's like wanted them both to be 300. So we had to be really creative about what order we put them in, keeping in mind, if there are any 2-page spreads that, they don't break when you move the stories around, and wanted to make sure that, we had a good mix of styles and a good flow of going from a dramatic story to something light. And then after that, go to something action packed. And then you can go back into drama, So in this particular case, we really did build this pretty close to from scratch.
So I have the final covers open here. So I thought that Mike could talk about some of the spot processes that are here. They're like in magenta and different colors, and they kind of show where he's planning to lay out the special features on the cover. So my screen is open with this stuff open on it, and then Mike can talk to it, because I think the covers are really something that separates our stuff.
Yeah. So this is one of the manga volumes right here, and a couple things to point out. The manga will have French flaps, which I know that's not that's not very standard with manga, but we want to make sure even our trade paperbacks are just that
standard. I like it.
Yeah. So those, what you see on the far left and the far right, those will be French flaps that are folded into the cover. In this layer of the file, this is the 4-color layer that gets printed in color, and you'll notice that there's no title on there, but that's because, Chris, if you jump to the second page,
that one,
no, the one with the magenta,
that one on the bottom.
Oh, I don't see a bottom. I don't know, maybe my screen's cut off.
No, it's let me see. Are you sharing the right screen, Chris?
Let me see. I've never done it before.
We're looking at the cover to volume 2. It looks like here with Astro Boy on the French flag.
So I'll go on that one then, because I have 2 things open.
It looks like we're looking at InDesign.
How about now?
We're looking at the InDesign.
Oh, you're still looking at the InDesign.
Yeah.
Are you sharing your screen? This is a dumb question because this is the way StreamYard works. Are you sharing your screen, or are you sharing the window?
Let me share my
the app, I think is what it is.
Okay. So I should be able to share my entire screen, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So present, share screen. I'll show these tips again. I get it. Entire screen. There we go. Okay, you're good now. So now you should.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Broke the internet.
All right. So here we go. All right. So this is an example, and this is one of the hardcovers. This is one of the hardcover covers. So this doesn't have the French flaps, but they work the same way in this particular design. So the first page, this is just the color pass. This is just printed 4-color. And you might notice a little bit of stretching, like on the bottom and the left, like where the moon is and where the character's spacesuit is. There's actually 0.625 inches of wrap. That's where the image wraps around the cardboard of the cover. So you won't see that stretching. That'll just be hidden by the wrap when the cover's.
And then we move down here and we have this.
So so then the second page in here, this magenta, this is 100% magenta, no other colors in CMYK. This is our spot UV map. So when you put it all together, all of those elements on the color will have that extra shiny gloss.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third page, the third page is, this is all going to be in silver foil. So this is why that type isn't on the color level, because even though in some of our mock-ups we had white text in the color version, since there's always going to be just a little bit of registration issues, even if it's only like a 0.5 millimeter, you can never guarantee things are going to line up perfectly. So rather than run the risk of the silver foil not aligning, and then you'll see a little bit of white on, between the characters, we just take that white away. So it's just going to be silver directly on the red background.
And then there's the cover. And I also have the one with the flaps open, Mike.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. Like in this case, we are doing spot UV even on the flaps.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see some purple in the magenta file.
Right down there.
Yeah, so even the flaps will have some spot UV. One other thing that we're doing with the hardcovers, we're not doing it with the manga, but on the hardcovers, we're using what's called a machine graining on the cover, where basically it applies a texture to the lamination. So, we apply a matte lamination, just, to make it feel good. But then while that matte is still warm and wet, they apply a textured roller to it that then gives that lamination a pattern texture. And we've been doing a lot of kind of linen graining lately. So I don't know if you've seen like Monkey King or whatnot, but it makes it look like it's printed on like a canvas board because it has kind of this weaving texture to it. So, and there's a lot of textures. I mean, I remember, boy, what was it? Didn't we apply like a kind of a leathery texture on Reason for Dragons, Chris?
We did. That's my first book.
Yeah.
Because Mike and I know each other from Archaea.
Okay. Yeah.
Archaea. Okay.
Yeah. So we have a little bit of a history, but yeah, that was a leather type of texture that was on it.
Yeah, but that's a process that I don't see a whole lot of people using, but we really like it because, we can get this, fabric or, leather kind of sensation by just applying a texture to the lamination.
Yeah, this is like a leather.
Even when highlight there you go. Now you're on camera, Chris.
Oh, well, yeah, I have these, but it has that leather. Yeah, you're right. It has even the European.
Oh, you're right. That does remind me of what you guys did in Archaea.
Yeah.
When you guys were there. Okay.
So on my screen, though, I have this is the last page.
So yeah, so
I figured.
Yeah, we did make one of those.
Yeah. So I have I have this up over here if you wanted to see a little bit of the inside.
I did. I wanted to see that.
Let me get back to that. So this is the inside of the book. So this is the last page.
Mm-hmm.
The last spread, yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is the last story, of course. Mike, you want to explain what this is here? Because people might find that odd.
Whoa, this is like the Smash Brothers of Tezuka properties.
Oh yeah, so this awesome. So one of the cool projects that came is called Team Phoenix by Kenny Ruiz, and they kind of came up with this for the original TEZUCOMI production, where they were just thinking, hey, why don't we do like a crossover where we bring all these characters together into the same world? And they created this short story.
Oh man!
But I think I can talk about it because it has been announced that there's a full Team Phoenix series that spun off of this that Kenny Ruiz did after this, and I think, not to plug another company, but I think Udon's going to be putting them out next year. But this is the story that kicked that off, and it does actually. The bad guy in this is, I don't know. I'm spoiling it. I mean, I think you're supposed to think that it's Astro Boy is the bad guy, but it's actually Pluto.
Yeah, I kind of figured when you see the silhouette. But all these characters that I grew up with, this is so cool.
Just seeing Big X and Dororo next to
Astro Boss and Blackjack there, looking all cool with his.
When I saw Black, so when I was building this book, I had already done all of Volume 1. This is volume 2. And I did all of volume 2. And then when I got to this story, I was like, very familiar with a lot of these
we set it up like the Avengers. We set it up. Like we introduce each of the characters and then we bring them all together in the last.
Yeah, it felt like an obscure, like even the most obscure thing was kind of referenced or it was in my mind from working on so much of it, right? So for me, just as a person who builds these books, this was like a very satisfying thing after 600 pages to see, and as a reader, as someone who didn't know like every single thing, and some of these things are not even printed here, so how would I know them unless I was a super fan, right? So it just was. This is one of the ones that, in my opinion, on the larger pages, is just like chef's kit. It's just like beautiful, so. Yeah, so that's Team Phoenix. So it ends on a bang, but because it's in reverse, it kind of starts on a bang, volume 2. So,
well, I think I haven't seen the full Team Phoenix series that's come out.
Right.
But there are characters. I mean, there are certainly a lot of characters who don't show up. Like in this story, you don't see Princess Knight, you don't see Midnight or any of it. But I think they might show up in the full series. So, I mean, I do think...
Mike, you're getting me excited about this book. That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. I wish we were doing it, but Udon got it first.
But now...
Man, this is 600 pages, so I think there's quite a bit here if you're a fan of this stuff.
Yeah.
This is just some Astro Boy stuff. So if you look in the middle here, this it looks like an error, but it's not. It's like
that's the trim.
Cut. Like if you look at where these two lines meet, that's where it gets cut. So this is actually just kind of like spillover, just to have something there.
And when you mean it gets cut, I'm loving this behind the scenes. This is my kind of jam, by the way.
Mike, you could talk about how the thing cuts the paper.
We're talking about if you look on the edges, you'll see those little lines on the corner and at the very top. Those are the trim lines. So if you were to run a cursor or here, some kind of a split down that line, it'll actually take that extra material off. What you're seeing is an artifact of in design. The pages are literally right next to each other. But when we export the print file, it separates them into 2 separate printed pages. For some reason, I don't know. It's something at the printer that they require.
It's the way they do it.
So you'll see a little spillover from the right page on the left and a little spillover of the left page on the right.
Okay. Nice. And you guys are going to go with sewn binding on the hardcover, I assume?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then I assume the tankobon will be...
Oh, sorry, Siri. I wasn't talking to you.
And the tankobons will be in glued binding?
Yeah, we were thinking about, especially with the French flaps, we were thinking about different things that we wanted to do with the manga-sized one, but I mean, all of our paperbacks to date have been really solid. So, we're sticking with that.
Okay. So, and then that leads to my question, because I could talk about this stuff all day. I love this kind of stuff. Then when you're cutting the trim sizes and whenever you're putting this together, Chris, is probably a question more for you.
Sure.
The dimensions have to be different? Like what you were showing, like where it gets cut, does that have to be different going from...
In InDesign, I mean, I could show you this file, even though I have the wrong file open, just to show you that information.
Yeah, sure.
So here's a page with 1 bit of dialogue, so that's not going to be wrong.
Okay.
This was the very first draft that we've gone through 5 drafts in. But
gotcha.
Wow.
So some of these pages. So one of the most interesting things about this project was a lot of the pages are at different sizes. Like a lot of people worked at different resolutions, at different page sizes, because when you work on an anthology, now I wasn't there when they made this, where they made it originally, but we did just work on Black Box, and that's an anthology that had a lot of the same kind of file issues and kind of flavoring, because a lot of different artists they'll work at different sizes, they'll work in different programs, they'll work at different resolutions. So this also had that, where it's a bunch of files in different sizes and stuff. So the trick is just to, and it was tricky with this manga stuff, because we're trying to put these on pages, especially in the hardcover edition, that are, you know, they weren't originally intended for that size. So you have to kind of make it land where, you know, the art goes off into a bleed where it was supposed to, you know, this one over here. So it has to extend, you know, into the bleed zone. So a lot of them, though, have white outlines around them. Like a lot of manga pages are not full bleed, just like by their nature, they're not, unless something really grand is happening. So a lot of it really just fit really well.
Well, we did when we picked our trim sizes. I mean, rather than like a lot of our books, our hardcover books will be, you know, we stick to either 8.5 by 11 or 9 by 12 or something that's a little more standard to our library. But when we brought this in, we were like, well, let's look at the actual ratio of the pages. And that's why instead of 8.5 by 11, these are 7.5 by 11.
So if I hit W here in InDesign, watch what happens. So this artwork extends past the bleed line. So when it gets cut, the image goes all the way to the edge, right? So if I hit W, that's what's getting printed.
Yeah.
So see, like, so there's not going to be any white on the edge, right? Because the artwork goes right off the page. You know, it's sized to do that. So, you know, and then on this side, because it's you know, it's hitting this page over here, you don't worry about that gutter area. You know? So,
and actually, and similarly, that's a reason why our manga versions, because I think standard manga is what 5 by 7.5, and ours is 5.25. It's just to match the page ratio. Of what we were given.
So, and what Mike was talking about with the lettering is getting all these Japanese names are coming up as not a real word, but they are. They have the red underline under them.
Oh,
but
man.
You know,
all of those signs in the background, you know, no more Cynthia and Tyranny, all that stuff. We had to airbrush that out to start.
Yeah, that was all in Japanese. Yeah, and we had to go. There's one back here that still is if you zoom in, but it's so far in the background.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to ask. The other question is the sound effects.
Sure.
Yeah, in most cases we left them alone. I mean, for 2-1, I mean, the biggest reason is just they're flattened into the artwork, and it would just be a nightmare to try to pull them out, especially with all the screening that was done. I mean, when you start messing with screening, you know, any kind of cut becomes super obvious. So we didn't want to do it because it would have been a nightmare. But also, you know, again, it's just keep it authentic. I mean, I think people who, you know, manga readers who read this, you know, they're used to Japanese onomatopoeia.
Yeah, I like having a little, you know, a little bit of the characters in it, even though some of it is changed to English, so you know what's going on. You know, it kind of makes it feel kind of lived in. You know, like it's like you're still in the zone. You know, if you leave a little bit of it.
Yeah, Ken Nomura's story. I don't know if that's in this volume. If you could jump to any of those pages, but you know, he draws all of those sound effects in there, and it's just part of the artwork.
Yeah, this is Joe Kelly's.
Yeah,
right,
this is the blackjack story they did. Oh,
yeah. Scroll up to where they're shooting the machine guns and stuff, and you'll just see it's a lot of dashes.
I mean, look at this panel right here.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
So that's always the question about like manga translations. Like, should they translate the sound effects? It's not authentic. Should they translate them outside of the panel, leave it out in the back of the book? You know, a lot of purists are very against translating the sound effects. They like to keep it authentic as possible and can kind of make up what the sound effects are. I mean, if you're
especially if it's part of the artwork,
machine guns, you know, I think we got that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's in the artwork and it's like, you know, especially if they're like really dynamically drawn, you can kind of figure out, like right there, you know, plick, pish, you know, some of those are kind of European onomatopoeia. You know, with a U. You know, it's like, okay, we know we can hear the sound in our head. We don't have to translate all of those bloobs to blubs, you know. Some of it you can just kind
of like this one down here, tickety 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 tickety, like that one. That doesn't seem very US, that sound effect.
Yeah.
A lot of the times they write like just a slightly different version of the sound effect that we would write.
Extra U's and things like that.
I do love the history of onomatopoeia, though. Even in American comics, like how some creators just went and started making up their own sounds because they really had no idea what it would sound like to put a take a sword out and put it through like some magical creature's head.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one of the ones that really gets me is when they say like, like we're like, you know, like we usually write UGHN or UGH or whatever, but they write like HUH, like but it means like like
well,
to them,
and
like
even like laughter. There will be a lot of times where a character is laughing, and in English when you read it, it looks like it's high. It's just HI. So in those cases, we'll try to translate it to he or he. Something that's a little more
right.
When you read it in English, it's laughter. Otherwise, I'll have people asking, it's like, why does he keep saying hi? Hi. It's like, no, that's not.
Yeah, it can come across as odd. This is the Team Phoenix. This is really an amazing entry in this.
Man, the art in that is killer.
It's sick. Like it's amazing. It's like
so
to see all these characters is like it's wild.
That's so you guys have a translating team, and then you guys put all the. Wow, it's a lot of work. 600 pages.
Yeah.
Mike,
I wouldn't say we have a team. There's a translator that does a lot of our books, and he's great, Dan Christensen. So yeah, Dan translated all these stories, except for Joe Kelly's, where we got the original script from Joe.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, he's really good at what he does, and then he sends us a Word doc, and there's a lot of initial cut and paste into balloons, and then I'll go through and do an editorial pass, and when I do the editorial pass, I always try to also do like a localization where Dan will try to translate things as accurately as possible, but sometimes that accuracy may not sound natural or flow as well in English. Like maybe there'll be slang terms or something that doesn't they don't translate as well into English, or it just sounds weird when you translate it directly. So there'll be times in there where I'll localize, and I'll change a little bit of the voice just to make it sound a little more natural. But
not 90s manga localization, right?
Right.
You remember those days? Oh man, some of those translations, they crack me up to this day. I still have a lot of those older volumes that were translated by Eclipse or the early days of Studio Proteus.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, certainly with a lot of our French books, and I kind of found it to be the case with a lot of these stories as well. The authors are, I mean, they're flexible. I mean, as long as the intention comes across and the characters stay true to their intention and motivation, they've, for the most part, they've all been, really happy with our translations. If there's something, we'll send it for their feedback, and if they're like, oh no, he actually was referring to that character, so this should be written like that. Like there'll be a couple times where the translator misunderstood an intention, and we can fix that pretty easily. But yeah, for the most part, they're happy as long as the story, reads well. Like if the characters sound cool and the plot comes off of,
it reminds me, like you brought up Reason for Dragons. I remember, like, I have this Italian version here that it got licensed over there, and they wrote me, from Italy, to check if my intention was still clear in my script, right? Like if what they changed to localize it, right? Because there's so much slang and like all kinds of context that doesn't really work sometimes. And when you translate it, you don't want the author's intent to change, right? Even though you're getting rid of some of that slang because it doesn't make sense in the country where they're reading it.
But you want it to sound natural. I mean, there are so many translators. I've read a lot of English translations of other French books, not that we publish, but where honestly, it's like, this is an interesting story, but my God, I'm falling asleep on the 16th page because you translated it so.
It's like robotic.
Yeah, it sounds robotic or overly Shakespearean, and it just doesn't sound like how characters should actually talk.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about. It's like, because you used to, American comics have a different tone than European comics. Just like manga has a different tone than any of them, and I can kind of see Yeah, there are some of my viewers have a hesitation with European comics for the same reason that reading right to left format. Like they just can't wrap their brains around that. But yeah, I can see the difficulty in trying to translate something and keep it as close to the source or the original material. And yeah, that's got to be like hard decisions to make. And
it is, and I think the best what we've done is just make sure that we take it in a different approach depending on who the author or original licensor was. I mean, there are some authors who want you to translate exactly what they said. Yeah, and those can be more challenging just because again, you don't want it to sound boring, but then there are others who are like, yeah, no, just make it sound cool, just make it easy to read. So it depends. It depends on the author, but I mean, really, at the end of the day, I think the important thing is you want to translate it in a way that's going to keep people turning the page and continuing to read the book. Like if your translation is so accurate, but it's so dry, it's like quicksand.
I've watched a lot of anime recently. I got a Crunchyroll trial on my Xbox, so I'm like just going through a bunch of stuff before it expires, like this week. And there were so many animes that were translated like verbatim, like what we're talking about.
It sounds
they come across as unintentionally funny.
Yeah,
because they're so rigid. It's like, I'm Spike Spiegel and I'm here to solve this thing, and I'm gonna walk over here, and Faye, you better do that. Like, it just sounds like some of them are better than others. Even within the same series, they're better sometimes. It depends on like how it was approached, like what version you're watching and stuff like that. So I think our translation is great because, like, I mean, obviously I can't read the original Japanese one, like I'm incapable of doing it. But, I mean, what I got as soon as I read it felt very natural. I found myself laughing. I found myself caring about some of these characters, I was rooting for them in the end in the Team Phoenix, like in this thing that feels like this big finale to everything I just read.
Well, and hopefully all of the characters have their own voice. I mean, that's
they really feel like that. Like Black Child feels like his own thing, and like Astro Boy is his own thing, and it doesn't matter if it was like Bernard's, the Ogre Gods artist, like his version of it, or it was like Joe Kelly's version of, like, it still felt like the Blackjack character. Like the translation felt like consistent between characters, even though there's different art teams and creative teams working on different stories. Like it feels really well done.
Yeah, Blackjack is the only character who really
gets multiple.
Yeah, I mean, there's 18 stories in this series, 9 per volume. I think Blackjack is the only one that's got one story, right? Two stories based on that one character.
There's artists that do, like Kenny Ruiz did 2 stories, right? Like sometimes there's an artist who does 2 different stories, but the character, Blackjack, he shows up 3 times, right? He has 2 stories, and then he's in Team Phoenix. So if you like Blackjack, he's in this. He's also my favorite character after reading all this stuff.
We're super blessed in Mexico to have a very extensive part of Mr. Tezuka's work available in hardcover. I think Omar has. Yes, Chris, you guys sent me a copy of Volume 1, and now I got to go find the other volumes. The hardcover of Phoenix, and that's not even available in America anymore, like in softcover or in hardcover format. It's impossible book to find.
I know that. I mean, I don't know if it's because we're approaching his 100th birthday or whatnot, but I mean, I know that Tezuka Productions is they're really interested in getting this stuff out there again, and especially I think that's why they're really interested in this project with us. Is to the point that we've made several times already. There are properties here that I guarantee you most Americans have never even heard of.
And I think it's time to remind them, Mike. So how can people help? Besides clicking the link, spreading the word, how many days are left?
I guess 9 days. So it ends on the 18th, Friday, a week from this Friday.
A little over a week.
Yeah. So, and the quickest, easiest way to remember how to get there is just www.tezucomi.com. COMI.com, and that'll take you to the campaign.
And the more people who back this sort of thing, like all the time on crowdfunding and Kickstarter, like you're sending a signal to us that this is what we want.
Yeah,
you want, right? And we want to do it, of course. But
we got stretch goals. Yeah, we got stretch goals. I think we've already unlocked what, 6 so far, 5 or 6.
Whatever the 60K stretch goal was.
Yeah, we just unlocked the 60K stretch goal, and I was in the middle of getting the update to reveal what the 70K one is, but yeah, I mean we've got stretch goals every $10,000, and the more backers we get, the better the product is for everybody.
And the more likely we are to keep pursuing, manga stuff. We'll look harder at those things if we know that people really, really want them and they respond to them. So super important. Like, let us know that you want this type of stuff.
I mean, honestly, we've done, I think this is almost our 30th Kickstarter campaign. And in that time, we just keep building more and more of a community. I mean, we only get like maybe 5 to 15% people coming back. So every time we do a campaign, we keep building that community. I think we've got like 16, 17, 18,000 fans. And it's a great community. I mean, I try to respond to as many comments and messages as I can on a daily basis. And, if people have suggestions, we are totally open to it. So we want to really engage the community. So join the campaign and join that community.
We will reply to you.
That box said
it may take a few days, but
that box said it's definitely tempting. I keep looking at that one. Beautiful box set. And you guys put out some beautiful books. So I just want to take this time to thank both of you for joining me to talk about this wonderful project, to talk about the legacy of Osamu Tezuka, and hopefully we get to. And honestly, the behind the scenes is so interesting to me, how it all comes together. So thank you, Chris, for sharing all those files.
Happy to do it.
And yeah, I can't wait to see this book like physically. I can't wait to see turning the pages of this. It looks amazing.
Yeah, you'll be rushing to get to Team Phoenix.
And I can't wait to see what other projects you guys are working on next.
Yeah, we've already got the next one on the drawing board, and it's going to be pretty cool. So we'll probably have to.
I'm very very excited about the next project. I'm this year. It's one of my favorite ones. And I had a project that was mine this year, and this one's one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of really interesting deluxe limited edition production design value items going into this next one that could be interesting to talk about.
And I'm curious what the 10th anniversary will bring too, because you piqued my interest when you said you got some stuff lined up. So
there's a lot. The announcements are alone as part of the celebration of the 10th anniversary. Like, there's some serious announcements.
Yeah, I'm like having to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from
saying
what they are, but there are licensors involved, so we have to,
Absolutely. Yeah. I get it. Thank you everybody for joining us. The link is in the description of the video. Go and support this wonderful project and let these folks know what you want to see too. What other manga, or doesn't have to be manga related. What other projects you want to see from across the seas?
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. And thank you two gentlemen for joining me.
Thank you.